Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Today's show is going to be a weekend review. We will walk through the top 10 for the weekend of November 3rd through the 5th. The numbers just came out this morning. We will walk through the top 10, then we'll look at some limited movies that came out. And then do a little bit of a preview of what's coming up in the next week. But let's start with this weekend. What an exciting weekend it was, too. I think everybody knew going into this weekend that Thor was going to do well, right? I think, 5-6 months ago when you said, a third Thor movie was coming out, I think myself included thought, okay, like it's going to do decent. It's coming out in November. It's probably going to do something like a Doctor Strange number, what the last Thor did, 80s, maybe 90s if it's really good. May even break 100 if it's super high quality and just very well done. But when the trailer started dropping and the marketing started for this film, it was apparent that there was something a little bit special about this one. Of course, you have Hulk involved in this one as well. So that gets the hype level up. Whenever they throw in another character, I feel like comic book nerds just like lose their minds. But whatever, it works from a business perspective. It seemed very super vibrant, kind of almost a comedy on some level. It just did not seem like the other Thor movies, and it didn't really seem like any of the other MCU movies. It had more of a feeling, I guess, towards the Guardians, sort of more of a fun romp, if you will, than sort of a serious comic book film. So it became pretty clear about 2-3 months ago that $100 million was definitely in play. Once tracking came in, I think tracking was below 100, I want to say. I can't remember because it starts 3 weeks out. But tracking was around, I want to say, like 90 million, which is what people were thinking a few months back. But as we got closer and closer to the launch or release of the film, that tracking just like basically like a roller coaster, just going click, 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 kept going up and up and up. Until we ended up at like the 100 to 120 range, which was a huge range when you think about it. But at the top end of that range was 120, and the possibility that Thor could beat out Spider-Man Homecoming, to have the second biggest comic book opening of the year behind the Guardians. I think the Guardians number never really felt like it was in play. The 140s just didn't really have that super, super mass appeal to all different quads. But there was something special about this one, and it ended up beating Spider-Man Homecoming. Thor came in at $121 million this weekend, is the current estimate. My guess is that actually might go up a bit because it has been playing so well on Saturday. And I think today is going to be, hey, we got an extra hour today, right? So I think the estimate might bump up to 122, but for right now it's $121 million. It played in 4,080 theaters. Per theater average was $29,658. So just shy of the $30,000 mark. Thinking about this film, it's hard to wrap my head around how we got here, right? Like, I'm obviously, if you listen to the podcast, I am not like the comic book nerd aficionado. Never really got into comic books. I have not been the hugest fan of this phenomenon since the beginning. Remember, I'm in my mid-30s, so the comic book phenomenon started when I was like 20. So it's kind of been nonstop for the last 15 years for me, and it's sort of been one of those things where it's like I'll check them out every once in a while, and I really like some of them. They're really fun, but it's never been necessarily my cup of tea. So sometimes I don't give comic books sort of the time of day like I should. And Thor was definitely one of those. Thor was a movie where I was like, okay, it's definitely kind of cookie cutter MCU stuff. I think I've seen parts of a couple of Thor movies. If I'm not super into comic book movies, and I felt like Thor was kind of like almost niche within the comic book sort of world. Same with the Doctor Strange, which I did see, did not like at all, to be honest with you. So it felt definitely second tier comic book stuff. And I think that's a pretty fair assessment, even though I have some bias there. I felt like it was second tier. It maybe even some parts of the movie were third tier, but for the most part, a second tier comic book movie that, for all intents and purposes, would never really break the $100 million opening mark. It wasn't Captain America. It wasn't Spider-Man. Wasn't anything like that. But I could tell immediately when the marketing came out for this, I was like, uh-oh, like this one feels like fireworks when you watch the first trailer. And I'm not even into this stuff. And I was like, this is freaking amazing. Like, it was so enrapturing, just so colorful. It was like watching the 4th of July fireworks. I mean, the trailer was that exciting. So if someone who's me, kind of like a curmudgeon when it comes to comic book movies, if I was attracted to it, then I can only imagine what the millions upon millions of people around the world thought of, who are sort of more into the MCU, DCU stuff. So it was kind of like, it's almost like, I don't want to call it a perfect storm, but it was like a mixture of a lot of really positive, great elements for this film. If you take a big step back, where does this sort of fit in terms of, MCU and comic book openings? It's definitely outside the norm of the second tier stuff, right? And so that's the big question, I think. Is this now first tier comic book movie, or is it still second tier, right? If you look over let's look at the last year or so. Spider-Man opened at 117, closed out, or is closing out at 333. Great multiplier on that one. So Thor beat out Spider-Man, not by a lot, by about 4 million according to current estimates, but just the fact that Thor in its third movie could beat a Spider-Man reboot, which is one of the most successful comic book series that exists on film, right? Super, super surprising. I did not expect it. Obviously, I didn't expect it. I think I guessed it was going to be like 102, 101 or something like that. And I'll get into why I thought about that, or why I was totally wrong about that. I was also wrong about Bad Moms, so we'll get to that too. So it beat out Spider-Man, just sort of, kind of at the finish line, it beat it out. Pretty close race there. With Wonder Woman opened a little lower than I think maybe people thought it was going to, or it was just sort of depressed as compared to the other big comic book movie openings, but ended up beating up everybody. I mean, opened at 103, still hasn't closed out. It's been like 4 months, feels like. Has it been 4 months? June, July, August, September, October, 5 months, and it's still out there. So it's at 412 now total, $412 million. Probably one of the best multipliers ever in comic book movie history. Unbelievable legs. I mean, just like, how did it play that well for that long? But a huge win for that. But still, Thor opened above that, right? I think the opening Wonder Woman was just a little bit depressed because people didn't really know what it was all about. And then people saw it, and word of mouth was amazing. Doctor Strange, which I thought was going to be the comparable to this. Before Doctor Strange, Guardians 2 opened this May at 146, closed out at 389. Really great performance for that film. I think no complaints from Disney or Marvel about that one in terms of its performance. Logan opened at 88, closed at 226. Doctor Strange opened at 85 last fall. In this same sort of time slot, it opened at 85, closed out at 232. That's sort of what I thought this Thor was gonna do. But it just, for some reason, it broke out. And I kind of want to talk about just a little bit on why that happened. This is why I do this podcast. It's not necessarily like, hey, here's what it did. I want to talk about the why and how a lot. That's what fascinates me the most about the box office. Anybody can sit here and report numbers and say, this is what this happened. And this, it's kind of like, who gives a shit? The how and the why is sort of the really interesting part of the entire box office world. And if you think about Thor, okay, you think about like what is different about this one. Obviously, when we look at the marketing, the quality was super high in the marketing. It seems, and I'll compare it to something like Doctor Strange, where I thought the marketing was terrible. The first trailer that dropped for Doctor Strange was bad. Everything was muted. It didn't look fun. It looked boring. It was like, why would I pay $20 to go see a boring movie? It just did not pop at all, right? Thor popped from the start. I mean, the first trailer dropped and it was just amazing. Everybody was on board. Tons of social media coverage. People were sharing it all the time and tweeting about it. So I think the marketing quality for Thor was kind of off the charts good. And when you look at the actual content of the film, right, the actual sort of product itself, it seems to be super high quality based on everything that we see. The Rotten Tomato score is 93% from critics. Top critics gave it 88%, right? So a huge sort of critical hit. This is like it's a comic book MCU movie. Like, that's a great score for this film. And the critic consensus for Thor on Rotten Tomatoes is exciting, funny, and above all fun. Thor is a colorful cosmic adventure that sets a new standard for its franchise and the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So critically, it's a hit, right? So then when I look at like the audience score and see what they're saying, 90% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. It actually just went up from this morning. I think it was 89 this morning. So 90% on Rotten Tomatoes from the audience. Cinema score of an A. I mean, you can't. Those are two data points that I think are decently important. But it basically proves that, hey, look, critics loved it and the audience loved it. That's sort of the bottom line at the end of the day. So the quality of the film, I think, objectively, as much as we can get objective about that sort of thing, is good. It's fantastic. It's super high quality, grade A, if you will, top tier, top shelf. And so you have a great marketing campaign. You have a very high quality product at the end of the day. Then you have to look at, like, shifting back to marketing a little bit. Did they market to the right people? And did they do enough of it? Right? Did they spend enough money in the right places when marketing? I don't really know that. Like, I can't really take a look at that. I don't really have numbers to show for that or to sort of even analyze. But one has to assume with this performance that it wasn't just high quality marketing. It was marketing done in the right amounts in the right places. I think this is sort of it feels almost like the maximum of what this film could do, because at the end of the day, if we take a little bit of a step back here and look at what this product and what this film really is, it's the third movie in a series, right? The threequel, is that a term? I guess it is a term. It's the third movie in a Thor series, right? And that Thor series is not even the mainline series of Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's definitely, when I say second tier, I mean, it's kind of one of those it's kind of lower on the sort of pedestal of what MCU is trying to market and trying to do. It's not necessarily a one-off film, but it's a side film, right? This reminds me, if you guys watch one of the more recent South Park episodes, really skewered the Marvel Cinematic Universe and like had like this 10-year plan laid out. First, we're going to do a Netflix series for this character. Then we're going to do a Groot movie. Then they're going to have their origin story. It was really funny. But this doesn't seem like one of those. It's not a mainline film. It's not part of like Avengers. Or if you're thinking DC, like it's not part of Justice League or anything like that, or Batman vs Superman. It felt like a mainline movie. It wasn't promoted that way. It wasn't given that type of budget. It was definitely given sort of a side story, second tier sort of exposure. But it's performing as if it's a mainline film, right? So I think they've really capitalized on the marketing side in terms of the quality and how much they're doing it and where they're spreading it. It seems like they've did like an amazing job here, because to get a Thor movie into the 120 range opening weekend is just, it's hard for me to even believe it. Because if you told me like 2-3 years ago, after knowing the Thor series a little bit, when what was happening with MCU, it'd be like, oh yeah, it's probably gonna like, they always print money, but it's like, that's probably gonna do like 70 to like 90, a very consistent opening, and then it'll close out at like maybe 2.7x, maybe 2.6x, depending on how good it is. I feel like MCU is constantly rewriting the rules of the box office, and even rewriting the rules of their own sort of cinematic universe, because this wasn't supposed to open in the 120 range. There's no way they thought it was going to open in the 120 range a year ago. There's no way I believe that they did that. So this is sort of the whole point I'm trying to make is like they maximize the potential for this product with their marketing because it is so good and so consistent, and they know exactly what they're doing. Deadline played a lot up on the social media angle, and I think it's so hard to measure that stuff. But they basically said Marvel did a wonderful job with laying the groundwork for this film. So even before the first trailer dropped, they had all the stars tweeting about it. They teased it constantly so that when it did drop, it had this massive hype situation where like everybody I'm pretty sure I saw the trailer like the hour it dropped just because there was so much hype about it. I was like, I gotta see this. What are people going on about? So they did really great work there. It is super hard to know how that translates into people actually buying tickets. It's tough. It's one of the tougher parts of the advertising marketing business is to figure out that return on investment. But I think overall MCU and Marvel and Disney knows what they're doing in order to build hype. They have that down to a pat. So you basically had a marketing campaign that was very high quality, that was performed very well, and very well targeted, right? So they had that all going for it. High quality film, right? So I think the last sort of parameter that you look at with this, and to sort of talk about why did Thor do so well this weekend, is the demand for it, right? Like, why would people want to see Thor now, right? And I think you're looking over the last couple months of the box office, and I did that on the show last week and walked through kind of like, I'm not like a year in recap, but just talking about like how off we are this year at the box office. And you're looking back over it and you look at that pit that was August. August was just this pit. I think it lost like $500 million in total in August. Nothing great came out. It was all shitty movies that didn't do well. Anything that did do well was definitely mid to lower tier, like an Annabelle 2, Hitman's Bodyguard, which just scraped in some money just because there was nothing else out. Then you had It come out, which did fantastic, and no one's gonna like knock that movie. It's at $325 million right now. Huge, massive breakout for that, which Thor almost beat, to be honest with you. It's opening weekend. Huge, massive breakout for It. And then it was kind of a lull a little bit in September, which September is usually pretty quiet. Then October rolls around, and Blade Runner was supposed to blow everything up. Blade Runner was supposed to be the big tentpole blockbuster in early October. It didn't play out that way. Blade Runner is now sitting at $85 million total in its fifth weekend. So it bombed, and it bombed massively, and that bomb left a huge crater in October. And the overall, and Hollywood Reporter wrote this kind of ridiculous article, I think last week, and I talked about it. Actually, it was this week in my show about how October was a bloodbath. It really wasn't. Like, it was kind of like we stayed pretty even to last year. October used to be a lot bigger month a few years ago, but this year it wasn't terrible. It was just sort of not great, kind of mediocre. And I think more important than anything, there wasn't a huge breakout movie in October. It was supposed to be Blade Runner. It didn't. Stuff like Happy Death Day and Boo 2 and Jigsaw did well and are successful, but they're mid-tier films at best. Happy Death Day is a lower tier film, but just broke out to the mid-tier. Boo 2 didn't really do that well. Jigsaw didn't do very well. So it was just kind of a depressed month. It wasn't a bloodbath. It wasn't a crash like August and late July were. It was just sort of like, kind of tepid. And, I think Thor came along at just the right time, and it had just the right tone, because this movie was fun. This movie was exciting. This movie was, I'm going to pay $15-20, maybe get some popcorn, maybe get a soda, and just really kind of escape for 2 hours and have a really good time. And, people, it's one of those, definitely a movie you'd go with like friends and shit, right? Or your like family. Like, it's just one of those, it felt like an event, right? And I think that, even more so than the high quality, is why this movie is doing so well. It is just people wanted an escape this weekend, and they wanted something fun and exciting. They haven't gotten that probably since It, right? It's really the first big event movie since It. And it has that sort of social media meme buzz to it. Like everybody's like, oh, I got to see this. It's crazy. And there's reactions everywhere. There's a whole phenomenon with just memes in general and hype in general that I've been trying to wrap my head around over the last couple of years since I've been doing this show. And there just seems to be moments where a movie that would have opened, let's say like Thor without that sort of buzz hype factor, probably would have opened in the 80s or 90s. This version, this exact content with this marketing, right, might have opened in like the 90s. But there's something about the way social media engages people where, and maybe because of the marketing this happened, you could say that people love talking about it, love sharing things about the film, and this is before it's even opened, and sort of just like they want to feel a part of something, and this film and going to see this film is a social phenomenon. And when it hits that sort of almost fever pitch or tipping point, that's when it goes from an 80, 90 to $120 million film, right? It was exactly the same. I couldn't I could ask anybody in my life, and I have all these different people in my life from different places and have different jobs and different, lifestyles or whatever. I could ask any one of them if they're going to see It, and everybody probably said, yes, I can't wait to see it. I mean, that's what it felt like with It. Thor's a little bit different, which is why I thought it wouldn't do as well. The most people I know aren't going to see Thor. Like, it's just not, I don't know. Maybe I'm not friends with a lot of comic book people. It just did not have that same level of buzz to me at all. But I was wrong, and I just don't travel in those circles because people wanted to see this movie, and they wanted to go with other people, and they wanted to talk about it. And that's what pushed it, I think, is that social media. I feel like it's more of a meme thing, though. And like, what do I mean by meme? Meme has been such a bastardized term over the last, I guess it came out like 20 years ago by Richard Dawkins. But I feel like that's the most appropriate term. It's like this, if almost like if you went to the Marvel subreddit on Reddit and just read the posts about Thor, that level of excitement and engagement and passion for the movie, that sometimes permeates out of that group, or maybe it goes more casual people because of the marketing and get that excited about it. And that tends to have a feedback loop effect where it spreads almost like a virus. That's what memes are all about, right? It's like a social mental virus that has a negative connotation. And sometimes there is a very negative connotation with memes. But in this case, I think it's pretty positive, is that desire from a small group of people or an individual spreads to other people almost like a sickness. And I think that's like, I look back on like movies like Jurassic World felt like that. It's like it becomes a must-see event. And what that really means is that the must-see part is this social pressure to see it, or this social group excitement to see it, that then like replicates itself very rapidly from one group to another, or one part of the world to another, right? Which is probably what's happening now. In any event, I think, take a big step back. Why did Thor do well? Number one, it's a really fantastic action, fun movie. Critics love it. Viewers love it. The marketing quality was out of this world. Some of the best marketing that Marvel has ever done, especially in MCU. Just a fantastic job playing up the fun, colorful side of the movie. It seems like the quantity and the targeting of the marketing was pitch perfect. And I think lastly, not necessarily most important, but I think what brought it up from the 80-90 range into the 120 range to beat Spider-Man Homecoming was that sort of social hype and buzz that may have been created because of the tone and the quality of the film, or the quality of the marketing. But it happened nonetheless, right? Like that's what happened. That's what pushed it $35 million higher than the last Thor movie. Now, where's this thing going to go, right? Where's Thor going to go? I don't No, and I think that it's going to be tough. It's going to be a super tough call, just because you have Justice League coming out in 2 weeks, not even 3 weeks, 2 weeks. I think it's 2 weeks, and then so I don't know. I don't know how Justice League and Thor are going to react with each other. I have no clue. But if you're looking at other like MCU big films, they tend to not have fantastic multipliers. Now, throw out Spider-Man Homecoming this summer, because I think that was very much a special case. Look at other comic book movies. Wonder Woman also, I feels like a special case. I'm not sure, like, is it going to go as low as, like, Ultron? Or what was Civil War? Is like 2.3 or something? Something super low. My guess is that because of the really exciting quality of the film and the really positive vibe that it has, and also the high artistic quality of it, I would say, because if critics love it, I think that's what counts towards that. I'm thinking at least a 2.5, right? I don't think it's gonna go 2.5. I don't think in general MCU films are buzz heavy and front loaded pretty significantly, so they don't normally go past 3. Like, that's just not something that normally happens unless they're super high quality. But Civil War was loved by the critics and loved by the audiences and had a terrible multiplier. So it depends on the environment that it's getting released in. So it's at 121 now is the current estimate. 3x would put it at 363. That's not going to happen. I could bet you $1 million it's not going to hit a 3x multiplier. Maybe a 2.5 puts it at 302. I think I would feel very confident saying it's going to go over $300 million. That would be my guess. Definitely going to go over 300 million. My guess is probably like a very standard 2.65 multiplier, almost 2.7. And that would put it at 320. So that would be my sort of guesstimate right now on how it's playing. Probably about 320. But is Justice League going to cut it off at its legs? Like, I have no idea what Justice League is going to do. Or how front-loaded is this movie? Because it did pop off so well, and went $35 million higher than the last one, is that just a sign of super front-loading? I don't know. I have no idea. But I think it's definitely gonna break past the $300 million mark. One thing I did want to say about Thor were the exit polls for this weekend, just to give you an idea of the demographics and who's seeing the movie. 56%. If you want to look these up, by the way, Deadline usually posts them in their box office weekend updates. So just follow them and look on their website, and they post these exit polls. So for Thor, 56% of the audience was men. 44% was women. So definitely skewed towards the men's side of thing. Not like outrageously, but significantly enough where you're sort of like definitely plays more towards the men a bit. 19% were families. I don't even know what the hell that means. What? Families versus what? Individuals versus friends? Like, how do they even do whatever? Stupid whatever. What is interesting though is 65% of the audience was over 25. So they were in the 2 over 25 quadrants. That surprises me a ton because it's PG-13. I think it's not PG. PG-13. I feel like this movie was meant for younger people. I don't know, like younger as in under 25. I don't know. It feels like it should be a little bit more even between 25 and under, but I don't know. I guess not. Maybe people were taking their kids to see it. I don't know. It doesn't really add up to me that over 63% of this audience was over 25. I thought it would be the reverse. I would assume this thing would play amazing with people under 25 and they would make a bulk up of this $121 million, but I was wrong. So we'll see how that plays out. We'll see if it should easily roll past the 300 mark. We'll see if it can hit that 350 mark. I think that's the big goal for it. If it hits 350, wow, you just kind of have to like applaud Marvel and what they've done. Like, and again, like they are a movie profit factory. They know what they're doing. They know how to market films. They know how to create films, and they do it well enough, and have enough business sense to release them at the right time in the right way. Where this one's going to easily make $150 million in profit, probably more in the $200 million profit range, which is just like outrageous when you think about it. I mean, it's like striking oil every time you make a movie. Really, really fantastic performance by Thor, and it'll be a joy to watch this one play out over the next few weeks, probably through the end of the year. Okay, so enough about Thor. Let's talk about the rest of the top 10. Number 2 this weekend was A Bad Moms Christmas. $17 million this weekend. It did open on Wednesday, so its total take so far is $21.5 million. It was playing in about 3,600 screens. Its per theater average was 4,711, which doesn't even match the original. Right. So I think the quick read hot take on Bad Moms Christmas. I was also wrong about this one. God, was I terrible this weekend. Just atrocious. I thought Thor was going to do low 100s. I think I said 101, 102, something like that. Totally off on that. Totally wrong. And I feel like I was even more wrong, not necessarily on the amount, but just the percentage wise on Bad Moms. I thought it was going to be in the mid 30s by the time the 5-day rolled around. What I was basing that on was the original. On the original, it popped off a little bit in the beginning, but really had fantastic legs. The original opened July 2016, end of July there, going into August. Opened up at $23.8 million for its original 3-day opening weekend. Its per theater average was $7,400. And this one, A Bad Moms Christmas, is only at $4,700. That's really, really bad. Like, this is, I can already sort of call this as a flop, unless it somehow finds a way to have miraculous legs over the next couple of weeks or few weeks, maybe even through Christmas. Again, that just brings up the whole thing, like, why are you releasing this now, right? Like, what's happening here? Not a good performance for a Bad Moms Christmas at all. If you look at the quality of the film, is that at play here? Probably yes, right? Like, 32% on Rotten Tomatoes. Top critics gave it a 15%. It looks like it was suppressed from critics, so a lot of them just didn't even bother to review it. Only 27 top critics looked at it. Only 79 total critics looked at it. That's about half of what it should be, right? So it looks like they did not hold a lot of critics' viewings, if any. So critically panned. Audience score right now and dropping is a 56% on Rotten Tomatoes. So terrible. Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score, and I just sort of picked this up, but like, it's scored exactly the same way as their main score. So that percentage is the number of people who gave it 3.5 stars out of 5 or higher. Right. So that's how that's broken down. So audiences really did not like it. A 56% on Rotten Tomatoes audience score is terrible. Cinema score, to kind of back that up, was a B. B doesn't sound terrible, but on Cinema Score, got to remember everybody who's going to see this when they do the scoring is pretty hyped for it. They didn't seem to like it all that much. I would have hoped for like an A- at least for this to do very well. So I think, I can call right now, it seems like a failure for STX Entertainment and this sequel about a year and a half after the original. It just did not click and is not clicking with people. You can look at the quality and say, hey, not a good quality film. Word of mouth is probably going to be pretty negative, so it's going to have pretty bad legs as well. That's definitely a possibility, and one of the reasons why it failed sort of out of the gate here. The marketing, I would say that the quality of it was not great. I watched all the trailers for this, just did not feel like there was a real hook there. And obviously, I'm a 35-year-old dude. I don't have a family or anything like that. So it's like, maybe I'm not the target demo, but I tend to view things kind of outside of myself a bit and sort of just look at them holistically and say, is this a really good marketing product for this product at the end of the day, for this film? And it wasn't. It just didn't seem... It's almost seemed like what happened was, and I watched the original, and I was kind of... I was really interested to see it. Just because I had a friend who was workshopping a script very similar to this about 4 or 5 years ago, and this version, not their version, ended up getting made. And Bad Moms was sort of a very similar theme to what she was doing. And So I was just interested in the whole process of what happened and why this script got chosen versus this other person. And so I saw the movie and I thought it was not great. I thought there was a lot of funny moments, and I thought the actors were fantastic, especially Catherine Hahn. Kristen Bell was decent. Mila Kunis was, she's just very breezy. Like, she can just walk into a room and sort of absorb the energy. So she could really hold her own as the lead. But I thought the writing was tepid at best. I thought the structure was terrible. It didn't really make a lot of sense. I was not a huge fan of it at all. But I was probably in the minority of the people who saw it, because a lot of people loved the movie and it did very well, especially had a great word of mouth multiplier. So I sort of knew the world and was not super stoked on another movie coming out. But like, I looked at the trailer, one thing I noticed, and what made the original interesting, is that they start out kind of like normal moms, right? And then they kind of go through this very, very rebellious phase. And that's the most interesting part about it, is watching like a normal sort of everyday mom kind of become like a teenage rebel in a way, and like drinking a lot, doing drugs and stuff like that. It was funny and it played really well, I think, in the original, at least that aspect of it. The problem is, this is almost kind of feels like the Bad Santa sequel issue, is that when you try to do it again, there's no initial state of innocence, right? That you can play ironically when they become a rebel. Right now, they're just rebels. And now it's like, is that really as funny anymore? Like, now it's kind of depressing. And I saw that trailer, I was like, like, this isn't, I don't know. Like, in one of the trailers, they were like, just like cruising down a mall escalator, and like they had a bottle of Jack Daniels. And I was like, wait a second, like, when did this go from like them being the sort of lady neighbor next door, very sort of passive, Stepford Wide-esque women, and then they kind of turn into like a Motley Crue type, which is why it was funny and cool and interesting. I don't want to see a movie about the Motley Crue type like that. The whole point of it was to see that transition, and now they're there. It's like, like, I don't, yeah. It reminded me a little bit of that TV trope thing, Flanderization, where you have a character, they go through a change, or it's more like they have certain traits, but then those traits just start to get like sort of enlarged to the point where they take over the character. That's what it felt like in these trailers. It just seemed like, I kind of like the mixture of the nice and the naughty, like not just like the Motley Crue shit. Like, that just seems stupid to me, because there's no ironic underpinning to it. Anyway, going to like art theory rabbit hole here. I think the marketing was not done very well. In terms of the quantity and the targeting of it, I'm not really sure. It seemed like they really, really tried to market it towards over 25-year-old women. I said that was a mistake last week, and I think that I've been proven correct, because when you look at the exit data for Bad Moms, the highest scoring group was women under 25. I felt like that needed to be as much of a focus in the marketing as women over 25 who could be mothers, right? A lot of women under 25, most of them are not mothers, right? So it's kind of like a counterintuitive thing, but I think, that group of women may want to see these older women acting in a certain way. I don't know. It made a lot of sense to me that women who were not mothers and younger would really enjoy this movie. And I think the marketing just did not target them as well. And so you have I think a pretty kind of messy marketing campaign. You ultimately have a bad comedy that is not connecting with critics or audiences. And I think the last piece of it is sort of like, what was the demand for this? Like, when is it coming out? Like, those sort of issues. And, why are you releasing it November 1st? I'm in Tennessee. It's 75 degrees outside right now. I mean, obviously global warming and shit like that, but like, it's too early. That's way too early. This should have come out. There's a weekend open on December 1st. Should have come out then. There's no reason it's coming out right now. I applaud their attempt to counter program Thor and then open it up a few days early or a day early. Didn't work very well. Now again, this all could be mute points. It could end up having amazing legs like the last one. I would almost certainly bet that it won't. With that low cinema score and audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, I just don't think that's going to happen. So if I had to pinpoint what I thought was the major issue here, like if I was in a position to produce a sequel or sort of make the decision about a sequel to Bad Moms, I would have done, summer 2018, 2 years after the original, focus more, I think, on that younger female crowd, the under 25 females, make a movie that's going to connect with them well. This one, obviously, the Christmas one did do well, but I would market more towards them. And I would also maybe even counter program like a bigger comic book movie in the summer. And then it becomes like a summer event that women can come together and go to see. Now things are just, I feel like it's just too busy, and like it's like we're getting up to the holidays, and like what's the most stressful time for how the hell would I know, but I just know from my mom, like the holidays are super fucking stressful for women and mothers especially. Like it's just a lot of stuff's going on. I think it's almost like it's not the ideal time to put this movie out, just to be honest with you. It just does not seem like you're going to hit peak demand for this right now. I definitely would have waited till next summer. And just, like a good July release, like the first one, I think it would have played really well. Almost kind of like the Magic Mike slot, like that 4th of July, sort of sometime in July, sort of, to get the women to go to something that isn't Spider-Man 100, which seems to be the only thing playing in the summer these days. In any event, so Bad Moms 2 is definitely, I would say, floppage. The budget's way too low to flop, so I would say a middling performance. Number 3 was Jigsaw this weekend, 6.7 million, 60% drop. That's actually a little bit lower than I thought. I thought it would be well into the 60s. It's no longer Halloween. Who's going to see this movie? Per theater average was $2,300, which is pretty low. It's only in second weekend. This one did not perform very well. Budget was only $10 million. Total take so far for Jigsaw was almost $29 million. This one I think will end the Saw series for the foreseeable future. If it was able to leg it to over 50 and 60, $70 million range, I would say, yeah, like green light, keep doing them. But like, it's not a good enough performance. And then when you throw in all the marketing money they put into this, I think they'll probably break even, maybe make a little bit, but not enough to keep doing it. The ROI is going to be too low. Number 4 this weekend was Tyler Perry's Boo 2 on Madea Halloween, $4.6 million, a 54% drop. Starting to lose theaters. Per theater average is almost to the Mendoza line, $2,100. This one did not perform fantastic. It has made $43 million total, but cost more than the original. I think they poured in a lot of marketing money into it. I don't see a Boo 3 coming anytime soon. Number 5 was Geostorm, $3 million, dropped about 49%. Per theater average is terrible at $1,140. It has only made $28 million on its $120, but I know it's actually $135 million production budget. Geostorm will be one of the biggest flops of the year. We're talking losses, at least $100 million in losses, probably more in the 120, maybe even up to 150 in losses. Number 6 this weekend was Happy Death Day, $2.8 million, a 45% drop. This one's starting to lose a ton of theaters. Lost 1,300 theaters. Per theater average is at 1,300 as well. Total gross so far is $53 million for Happy Death Day. Big win for Blumhouse Productions here and Universal. They're just cranking out these horror hits. Production budget on Happy Death Day was sub $5 million. That's a micro budget film, and it'll end up making at least $60 million at the box office. Just mind blowing. Number 7 was Thank You for Your Service, $2.26 million, 41% drop. Per theater average is just about $1,100. Total take so far is 7.3. It is only in its second weekend. This is also a flop. They're not going to lose a lot of money because didn't cost a ton. I thought this one was going to play a lot better than it did. I thought it was going to play maybe better even outside the military crowd, but it has not at all. Number 8 this weekend was Blade Runner 2049, 2.2 million. Per theater average, 1,500. That's kind of surprising. It's a little bit higher than I thought it would be at this stage. Total take so far is $85 million. This came out, oh my God, 5 weeks ago, technically. Man, every time I think about Blade Runner, I'm just bummed out because I was such a big Blade Runner fan and was so hyped about this collaboration between all these actors and the writer and especially director. And they threw $150 million at him. Warner Brothers did to do this. It was Warner Brothers, Alcon, and Sony sort of together did the production, and it's just a total fucking mess. Like, very well received by critics, and I think the people who saw it, but even my voice is getting lower. I feel like I'm at a funeral talking about Blade Runner. Just a massive flop for that movie. Number 9 was Only the Brave, the firefighter movie, 1.9 million, 45% drop. Per theater average is sub 1,000 at $921. Total gross is only $15 million for this movie. Ugh, another flop. Jeez. Maybe October was a little more rougher than I am giving it credit for. Damn. Let There Be Light. I don't really know this one. 1.6 million, 5% drop. Kind of on like a limited, not so limited run. It's in 642 theaters. Added about 270 theaters this weekend. Per theater average is $2,500. Does anybody know what the hell this thing is? I don't even know. I'm not even gonna look it up. I don't even care that much. I think it's a religious movie. Would be my guess, but I don't know. Whoever ADC is, Atlas Distribution. Oh, they also put out 9/11, that crazy 9/11 Charlie Sheen movie that came out in September. Oh, they did Atlas Shrugged as well. Who are these people? What? This is like some weird libertarian freak putting movies out. Okay, so that's the top 10. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what happened outside the top 10. Well, one thing to note, let's see here. Suburbicon dropped 60%. Its per theater average this weekend, and its second weekend was $567. Huge miscue there. I don't know what happened. Quality of the movies, it's been universally panned. With the people involved, Matt Damon, George Clooney director, Coen Brothers writing, this should have been an art house home run, but something went wrong with the writing or something. I don't know. It's honestly a complete fucking disaster. Horrific performance and a very terrible reception among critics. So that's kind of going to be a scar on those people for a bit. Especially George Clooney as director. I did talk a little about LBJ, the Woody Harrelson version, came out this weekend. I was wrong. I thought it was going to do about 3,000 per theater. It only did 1,700 per theater on its opening weekend. Absolutely terrible. Barely broke $1 million on about 660 screens. Or theaters, I should say. Okay, so LBJ, total flop. I don't know what the hell they were thinking. Rob Reiner did it. I don't know why they put it in the theaters. It should have gone straight to streaming, but I guess they want to make money in both places. Anything else? The other one big story I will say is the limited release of Lady Bird, right? And this is, keep your eye on this one. I know it got a really good reception at the film festival circuit, right? Greta Gerwig, who is a decently famous sort of indie actress, she got involved with Noah Baumbach of the last few years. Francis Ha, what a great movie. I don't really like his work, but that was easily his best movie. And she was phenomenal in it. She's kind of like mumblecore type indie, sort of that vertical of the indie world. This is her directorial debut, I believe, and coming out from A24. So you got a lot of these like light bulbs going off. All right, cool, like actress getting into directing, a lot of buzz from a really good sort of indie smaller distribution production company, A24. This thing's legit. So it opened on 4 screens this weekend. Per theater average was $93,000. It has the best average of the year. It beat out Big Sick. Big Sick had $84K per theater average. The question, okay, so this is like the big question. What is this going to do and where's it going to go? Because that's an amazing per theater average for a limited film. And that's why I shit on all those other limited films. Because I was like, if you want to break out as a limited film, you got to do 50K, 60K on your opening weekend in 4 or 5 theaters. You just have to. Because if you're not going to play well in New York and Los Angeles, where those theaters are, you don't have a chance in hell that you're going to play well outside of those areas, because those people love movies. They love going to movies. They'll see pretty much anything that's interesting. And if they're keyed off about it and they're primed into it, there's a decent chance you have a chance to break out. Just because, Steve Jobs is a perfect example of that movie that had 100K per theater average, I want to say, outrageously high, or even higher than that. But it didn't play outside New York, Los Angeles. So it's not, if you play well in those cities, you're going to break out. It's like you have the potential to break out if you do well in those cities. And Lady Bird's doing fantastic. Where do I think it's going to go? I don't think it's going to go anywhere. To be honest with you, not to be a total downer, unless it somehow makes that, it's like I was thinking about the brain blood barrier. It's almost like limited to wide release barrier, or I would say art house film crowd to mass audiences, that barrier. Only a few films can really do that, and they have to have a special sort of mixture of elements. One that sticks out is probably Juno. And I'm guessing I think it opened limited first and just really broke out and had a really good mass run. And there's other examples, but even look at something like Moonlight, one of the best pictures of the last 10 years, won the Oscar for best film last year. I think it struggled to didn't even make 30. I think it made mid 20s overall in its total box office run, just because the film's fantastic and just because a certain sect of people think it's amazing. And a lot of those people are critics as well. Doesn't mean it's going to make any money. Like, that's just the reality of the box office of the movie business. That's, quality does not automatically get you money and revenue. Not how it works. So while Lady Bird has 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, let's see what the audience score is. 90% audience score, played really well in New York and Los Angeles this weekend. I don't see it breaking that barrier from art house to mass audience. I just don't see it at all. Amazon has done a decent job with Big Sick in Manchester by the Sea by somewhat breaking out an art house film and breaking that barrier and getting out to mass audiences. Big Sick did okay, did about $40 million. I know they spent at least 25-30 on marketing though. So it's sort of like, how much do you want to spend to try and push it to mass audiences? Maybe I'm wrong about this one. It does have the feeling, or a feeling like it could connect with sort of people out in the middle of the country or not in these huge, massive cities. There's a potential that I just don't see it. My gut says it's not going to go anywhere. What it's going to do in its final run, I have no clue. But I would say sub 20 million. And even that would be a big breakout for it if it reached like $10 million. And watch, now it's going to go on to do 50, 60 million and win Best Picture. Definitely possible. Gut says that's not going to happen despite its fantastic performance. Okay, that's enough for this weekend and sort of review. There's nothing really else that much to talk about. So let's take a look, just a really brief look at next weekend. And I'll do a preview show probably Wednesday night of this week, just to sort of give my formal guesstimates about these new movies. Daddy's Home 2 is coming out from Paramount on Thursday, and then Murder on the Orient Express. Daddy's Home 2 I think is going to be pretty easy to read and kind of guess about what it's going to do. Murder on the Orient Express. I, even now thinking about it, no clue how it's going to do. I know it's going to play well with over 25s, but how well? And what does that translate to? Is it like a $30 million opening or like a $60 million? I literally have no idea how to read that one. And then we're to Justice League the week after, so it's going to be a pretty busy few weeks here. And I think that's mostly it. So I will be back on Wednesday with a preview show. talk about the new openers. Thanks for listening. This has been the Wildline Podcast.